Hello, brave souls. Welcome to Artificial Fluency Podcast. I'm Emma, and this is episode 154. If you're listening to this right now, I want you to know something important. You are stronger than you realize, braver than you believe, and more capable than you've ever imagined. Today's episode is called Rise Above, and it's dedicated to everyone who has ever faced a challenge that seemed impossible, encountered an obstacle that felt insurmountable, or experienced a setback that made them question their abilities. Whether you're dealing with difficulties in your English learning journey, facing challenges in your personal life, or struggling with professional obstacles, this episode is for you. I chose this topic because I believe that learning to overcome challenges is one of the most important life skills we can develop. It's also deeply connected to language learning. Every time you push through frustration when you don't understand something, every time you speak English despite feeling nervous, every time you get back up after making a mistake, you're building resilience that extends far beyond language skills. Today, we're going to explore 3 powerful areas that can transform how you approach challenges. First, we'll discuss the psychology of resilience, what it really means to be resilient, and how you can develop this crucial ability. Then, we'll dive into practical strategies for turning obstacles into opportunities for growth. Finally, we'll explore how to find and maintain hope during difficult times, because hope is often the fuel that keeps us moving forward when everything else fails. But I want to be clear about something from the start. This isn't going to be a superficial, think positive kind of conversation. We're going to acknowledge that life can be genuinely difficult, that some challenges are unfair, and that it's normal to struggle. What we're going to focus on is how to navigate these realities with strength, wisdom, and grace. I'll be sharing some personal stories about times when I felt like giving up, moments when challenges seemed overwhelming, and the strategies that helped me not just survive, but thrive. I'll also share insights from psychology research, wisdom from people who have overcome extraordinary difficulties, and practical tools you can use starting today. Remember, you can find the complete transcript and vocabulary guide on our website. And if something we discussed today resonates with you, or if you have your own story of overcoming challenges, I'd love to hear from you. Your courage inspires our entire community. So, take a deep breath with me, feel your feet on the ground, remember that you've overcome challenges before, and you have the strength to overcome whatever you're facing now. Let's begin this journey of discovering your inner strength together. Let's start by understanding what resilience actually is, because I think there are a lot of misconceptions about this concept. When most people think of resilience, they imagine someone who never breaks down, never feels afraid, and somehow stays positive through every difficulty. But that's not resilience. That's denial. Defining true resilience. True resilience isn't about being tough all the time or pretending that problems don't affect you. Resilience is your ability to bounce back from adversity, to adapt to difficult circumstances, and to keep moving forward even when things don't go according to plan. Resilient people feel fear, sadness, anger, and frustration just like everyone else. The difference is that they don't let these emotions paralyze them. They feel their feelings, process them, and then take constructive action despite the discomfort. I learned this lesson during one of the most challenging periods of my life. About 5 years ago, I was going through what I can only describe as a perfect storm of difficulties. My father was diagnosed with cancer, I lost my job due to company restructuring, and I was dealing with the end of a long-term relationship. Everything seemed to be falling apart at once. For weeks, I tried to maintain my usual positive attitude. I told everyone I was fine, kept busy with job searching, and pretended that I had everything under control. But the truth was, I was falling apart inside. I wasn't sleeping well, I had no appetite, and I felt like I was walking through my life in a fog. The turning point came when I finally allowed myself to admit how scared and overwhelmed I felt. I remember sitting in my car after visiting my father in the hospital, and I just started crying. Not pretty, quiet tears. I'm talking about ugly, body-shaking sobs. And you know what? It felt like a release. That was when I realized that acknowledging my vulnerability wasn't a sign of weakness. It was the first step toward genuine resilience. The components of resilience. Research in psychology has identified several key components that make up resilience. Understanding these can help you develop them intentionally. Emotional regulation is the ability to manage your emotional responses to stress and adversity. This doesn't mean suppressing your emotions, but rather learning to feel them without being overwhelmed by them. I remember working with a student, Maria, who was preparing for an important English proficiency exam. Every time she made a mistake during our practice sessions, she would become so frustrated that she couldn't continue. We worked on helping her recognize when she was becoming overwhelmed and developing techniques to calm herself down: deep breathing, positive self-talk, and taking short breaks when needed. Cognitive flexibility is the ability to adapt your thinking when circumstances change. Rigid thinking patterns can keep you stuck, while flexible thinking helps you find new solutions and approaches. For example, when I lost my job, my initial thought was, I need to find another position exactly like the one I had. This narrow focus was limiting my options and increasing my stress. When I opened my mind to different possibilities, freelancing, changing industries, even starting my own business, suddenly I had many more options to explore. Social connection is crucial for resilience. Having people you can turn to for support, advice, and encouragement makes a huge difference in how you handle challenges. During my difficult period, I initially tried to handle everything alone. I was embarrassed about my situation and didn't want to burden others with my problems. But when I finally reached out to friends and family, I was amazed by how willing they were to help. Some offered practical support, others just listened when I needed to talk, and all of them reminded me that I wasn't alone. Meaning-making is the ability to find purpose or significance in your experiences, even difficult ones. When you can understand how a challenge fits into the larger story of your life, it becomes easier to endure. Looking back on that difficult time, I can see how it led to positive changes in my life. Losing my job pushed me to start freelancing, which eventually led to more fulfilling work. My father's illness brought our family closer together. The relationship that ended made space for healthier relationships in my future. Self-efficacy is your belief in your ability to handle challenges and influence outcomes in your life. People with high self-efficacy are more likely to persist when things get difficult because they believe their efforts can make a difference. Building your resilience muscle. The good news about resilience is that it's like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. Every challenge you face and overcome builds your capacity to handle future difficulties. One way to build resilience is through what psychologists call stress inoculation. This means deliberately exposing yourself to manageable levels of stress or challenge so you can practice your coping skills. For language learners, this might mean joining conversation groups where you have to speak English with strangers, giving presentations or speeches in English, traveling to places where you have to navigate in English, taking on projects at work that require English communication. Each of these experiences might feel uncomfortable initially, but they build your confidence and resilience for bigger challenges. The role of mindset in resilience. Your mindset, the way you interpret events and challenges, plays a huge role in your resilience. There are several mindset shifts that can dramatically improve your ability to handle difficulties. Growth mindset versus fixed mindset is a concept developed by psychologist Carol Dweck. People with a growth mindset believe that abilities can be developed through effort and learning. People with a fixed mindset believe that abilities are static traits that can't be changed significantly. When you have a growth mindset, challenges become opportunities to learn and improve rather than threats to your self-image. Failures become feedback rather than evidence of your inadequacy. I see this difference clearly in my English students. Students with a growth mindset say things like, "I'm not good at speaking yet, but I'm improving." Or, "That was a difficult conversation, but I learned some new vocabulary." Students with a fixed mindset say things like, "I'm just not good at languages," or "I'll never be able to speak fluently." Optimistic versus pessimistic explanatory style is another important factor. When something bad happens, optimistic people tend to see it as temporary, specific, and not entirely their fault. Pessimistic people tend to see problems as permanent, pervasive, and entirely their responsibility. For example, if you do poorly on an English test, optimistic thinking, I didn't prepare well enough for this particular test, but I'll study differently next time. Pessimistic thinking, I'm terrible at English and I'll never improve. The optimistic approach is more likely to lead to constructive action and recovery. Learning from failure. One of the most important aspects of resilience is learning to reframe failure. In our culture, failure is often seen as something to be avoided at all costs. But resilient people understand that failure is often necessary for growth and success. I want to share a story about one of my biggest failures and how it taught me about resilience. Early in my teaching career, I was offered the opportunity to design and lead a new English program for a company. I was excited about the challenge and confident in my abilities. But the program was a disaster. My curriculum was too advanced for the students' level, my teaching methods weren't engaging, and attendance dropped dramatically. After 3 months, the company terminated the contract. I was devastated and embarrassed. My first instinct was to blame external factors. The students weren't motivated, the company didn't give me enough support, the timeline was unrealistic. While some of these factors were valid, focusing on them kept me stuck in victim mode and prevented me from learning. It took me several weeks to move past the initial shame and start analyzing what had actually gone wrong. I realized that I had made several critical mistakes. I hadn't properly assessed the students' needs and current level. I had been more focused on impressing the company than serving the students. I had been too proud to ask for help when I realized things weren't working. This analysis was painful but incredibly valuable. The lessons I learned from that failure made me a much better teacher. More importantly, it taught me that I could survive professional failure and come back stronger. The neuroscience of resilience. Recent research in neuroscience has given us fascinating insights into what happens in our brains when we face challenges and how we can literally rewire our brains to be more resilient. When we encounter stress or threat, our amygdala, the brain's alarm system, triggers the fight or flight response. This is useful for immediate physical dangers, but it can be counterproductive for the complex challenges we face in modern life. However, we can train our prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of our brain, to override the amygdala's panic response. Techniques like mindfulness meditation, cognitive restructuring, and gradual exposure to challenges can literally change the structure and function of our brains. This is incredibly empowering because it means that resilience isn't just a trait you're born with, it's a skill you can develop through practice. Resilience and language learning. Let me connect this specifically to your English learning journey, because language learning is actually an excellent way to build general resilience. Every time you speak English despite feeling nervous, you're practicing courage. Every time you recover from a grammar mistake and continue the conversation, you're building resilience. Every time you persist with studying, even when progress feels slow, you're developing grit and determination. The challenges you face in language learning, embarrassment about your accent, frustration with grammar rules, difficulty understanding native speakers, are perfect opportunities to practice resilience skills that will serve you in every area of your life. One of my students, Ahmed, came to me feeling very discouraged about his English progress. He had been studying for 2 years, but still felt anxious about speaking in meetings at work. We worked together to reframe his challenges as training opportunities rather than evidence of failure. Instead of avoiding difficult conversations, he started seeking them out as chances to practice. Instead of feeling embarrassed about mistakes, he began treating them as valuable feedback. Within 6 months, his confidence had improved dramatically, and interestingly, this new resilience started showing up in other areas of his life too. Cultural perspectives on resilience. It's worth noting that different cultures have different concepts of resilience. Some cultures emphasize individual strength and self-reliance, while others focus more on community support and collective resilience. In Japanese culture, there's a concept called gammon, which means enduring the seemingly unbearable with patience and dignity. In African cultures, there's often a strong emphasis on the role of community in helping individuals overcome challenges. Understanding these different perspectives can broaden your toolkit for dealing with difficulties. Sometimes you need individual strength, sometimes you need community support, and often you need both. Building daily resilience practices. Resilience isn't just about how you handle major crises, it's also about how you deal with daily stresses and minor setbacks. Building small resilience practices into your daily routine can prepare you for bigger challenges when they arise. Some practices that have helped me and my students include morning intention setting, starting each day by identifying one small challenge you'll face with courage. Evening reflection. Before bed, thinking about one thing that was difficult today and one way you handled it well. Gratitude practice. Regularly acknowledging good things in your life, even during difficult periods. Physical exercise. Regular movement helps regulate stress hormones and improves mental resilience. Mindfulness meditation. Even 5 minutes a day can help you develop emotional regulation skills. Learning something new. Regularly challenging yourself with new skills builds confidence and adaptability. The key is consistency rather than intensity. Small, regular practices build resilience more effectively than occasional, intense efforts. Now let's talk about one of the most powerful mindset shifts you can make, learning to see obstacles not as roadblocks, but as opportunities for growth, creativity, and breakthrough. This isn't about positive thinking or denying that difficulties are real, it's about developing the ability to find possibilities within problems. The opportunity hidden in every obstacle. Every obstacle contains within it the seeds of opportunity, but these opportunities aren't always immediately obvious. Sometimes they require a shift in perspective, creative thinking, or patience to recognize. Let me illustrate this with a story from my own life. 3 years ago, I was planning to attend an important conference in London where I was scheduled to give a presentation about innovative English teaching methods. I had spent months preparing, and this was going to be a significant opportunity to share my work and connect with other educators from around the world. 2 days before my departure, I developed severe food poisoning. I was so ill that I couldn't even stand up, let alone travel internationally. I was devastated. This felt like a massive setback. Months of preparation wasted, networking opportunities lost, and professional momentum interrupted. But as I lay in bed recovering, something interesting happened. I started thinking about how I could share my presentation content online. I had never considered creating video content before, but suddenly I had time and motivation to explore this possibility. Over the next week, I recorded my presentation, edited it into digestible segments, and posted it on various platforms. The response was incredible. The video reached thousands more people than my conference presentation would have, and it's still generating opportunities for me today. That illness, which seemed like such a setback, actually pushed me into digital content creation, which has become a major part of my work. This experience taught me to ask a different question when faced with obstacles. Instead of, "Why is this happening to me?" I learned to ask, "What might this make possible?" The constraint-creativity connection. One of the most fascinating things about obstacles is how they can actually boost creativity. When your usual options are blocked, your brain is forced to find new solutions. Psychologists call this the constraint-creativity connection. I see this all the time with my English students. Students who have access to translation apps often become dependent on them and don't develop their communication skills. But students who are forced to communicate without technological help often become much more creative and effective communicators. They learn to use gestures, drawings, simpler vocabulary, and paraphrasing to get their meaning across. One of my students, Lynn, was preparing for a job interview in English. She was very worried because her vocabulary wasn't as advanced as she wanted it to be. We worked together to turn this limitation into a strength. Instead of trying to use complex words she wasn't comfortable with, we focused on helping her express complex ideas using simple, clear language. This constraint forced her to become extremely precise and articulate in her communication. When she went to the interviewers commented on how clearly and directly she communicated. She got the job, and her supervisor later told her that her communication style was one of the reasons they chose her over candidates with more advanced English vocabulary. Reframing, the art of perspective shifting. Reframing is the ability to look at the same situation from different angles and find more empowering interpretations. It's not about denying reality or pretending that problems don't exist. It's about choosing interpretations that support your well-being and forward movement. Let me give you some examples of how reframing can transform obstacles. Rejection becomes redirection. When you don't get a job you applied for, instead of focusing on the rejection, you can see it as being redirected toward a better opportunity that's more aligned with your skills and goals. Mistakes become learning opportunities. When you make an error in English, instead of feeling embarrassed, you can see it as valuable feedback that helps you improve. Delays become preparation time. When plans are postponed, instead of feeling frustrated, you can use the extra time to prepare more thoroughly. Criticism becomes insight. When someone points out your weaknesses, instead of feeling defensive, you can see it as information that helps you grow. I remember working with a student named Carlos who was constantly frustrated because he felt his English progress was too slow. We worked on reframing his experience. Instead of comparing himself to imaginary timelines, he started focusing on the actual progress he was making week by week. Instead of seeing his current level as not good enough, he started seeing it as on the way to where I want to be. This shift in perspective transformed his entire learning experience. He became more patient with himself, more willing to take risks in conversation, and ultimately made faster progress because he wasn't fighting against himself anymore. The growth zone versus comfort zone. Most people are familiar with the concept of the comfort zone, the space where you feel safe and in control. What's less well known is that there's actually a three-zone model: the comfort zone, the growth zone, and the panic zone. The comfort zone is where you feel safe but don't learn much because there's no challenge. The panic zone is where the challenge is so overwhelming that you can't function effectively. The growth zone is the sweet spot between the two, where you're challenged enough to learn and improve, but not so overwhelmed that you shut down. Many obstacles push us temporarily into the panic zone, but the key is learning to move ourselves back into the growth zone where we can actually benefit from the challenge. When I first started teaching English in Japan, I was definitely in the panic zone. The language barrier, cultural differences, and teaching methods that were completely different from what I was used to left me feeling overwhelmed and incompetent. But gradually, I learned to break down the overwhelming challenges into smaller, manageable pieces. Instead of trying to master everything at once, I focused on improving one aspect of my teaching each week. I found mentors who could guide me, and I developed systems for dealing with the most stressful situations. Slowly, I moved from panic to growth. The challenges were still there, but they became energizing rather than paralyzing. I started to see each difficult class or cultural misunderstanding as a puzzle to solve rather than a threat to my competence. The power of small experiments. When facing a significant obstacle, it's easy to feel like you need a big, dramatic solution. But often, the most effective approach is to run small experiments, low-risk tests that help you gather information and build momentum. Let me give you an example from my own experience. A few years ago, I was struggling with public speaking anxiety. I wanted to do more presentations and workshops, but the thought of speaking in front of large groups made me extremely nervous. Instead of trying to overcome this fear all at once by booking a huge speaking engagement, I started with small experiments. I gave a short presentation to 3 colleagues. I spoke up more often in small meetings. I recorded myself giving presentations alone. I joined a local Toastmasters group. And I gradually increased the size of audiences I spoke to. Each small experiment gave me information about what worked and what didn't, and more importantly, built my confidence gradually. After 6 months of these small experiments, I was able to give a presentation to 100 people without overwhelming anxiety. This approach works particularly well for English learners. Instead of waiting until you feel completely confident to start speaking, you can run small experiments. Have a brief conversation with a shopkeeper, ask a question in a group setting, leave a voice message for a friend in English, participate in an online discussion forum, order food in English at a restaurant. Each small success builds your confidence and provides valuable feedback for improvement. Finding the hidden curriculum. Every obstacle has what I call a hidden curriculum, lessons that go beyond the immediate problem you're trying to solve. These meta lessons are often more valuable than whatever you were originally trying to achieve. For instance, when I was struggling with that failed training program I mentioned earlier, the hidden curriculum included the importance of thorough needs assessment, how to ask for help when I'm in over my head, the value of flexibility and adaptation, how to handle professional failure with grace, the importance of putting student needs above my ego. These lessons have served me in countless situations that had nothing to do with training program design. When you're facing a challenge, try asking yourself, what is this situation trying to teach me that goes beyond the immediate problem? Often, these deeper lessons are the most valuable part of the experience. The anti-fragile mindset. Nassim Taleb introduced the concept of anti-fragility, the idea that some systems don't just survive stress, they actually get stronger from it. This is different from resilience, which helps you bounce back. Anti-fragility means you actually benefit from the challenge. You can develop an anti-fragile mindset by looking for ways that obstacles can make you stronger, smarter, or more capable. For example, a rejected job application teaches you to improve your interview skills. A difficult conversation helps you develop better communication abilities. A project failure shows you how to plan more effectively. A health scare motivates you to develop better lifestyle habits. One of my students, Maria, developed an anti-fragile approach to her English learning. She started seeking out the most challenging conversations and situations she could find. She joined debate clubs, attended academic lectures, and even started a blog in English about complex topics. Each difficult experience taught her something new and expanded her capabilities. After a year of this approach, she was not only fluent in English, but had also developed exceptional critical thinking and communication skills that served her in her native language as well. Creating systems from obstacles. Sometimes the best way to turn an obstacle into an opportunity is to create a system that prevents the same problem from happening again while also generating positive outcomes. A few years ago, I was constantly struggling with time management. I was always behind on emails, missing deadlines, and feeling overwhelmed by my workload. This was causing stress and affecting the quality of my work. Instead of just trying harder to manage my time, I used this obstacle as an opportunity to completely redesign my work systems. I studied productivity methods, experimented with different tools, and gradually developed a comprehensive system for managing my tasks, schedule, and communication. Not only did this solve my original time management problem, but it also made me much more effective overall. I started sharing these systems with other teachers and eventually developed a course on productivity for educators. The obstacle became the foundation for a new area of expertise and additional income stream. The collaboration advantage. Many obstacles that seem impossible to overcome individually become manageable when you collaborate with others. Sometimes, the opportunity hidden in an obstacle is the chance to build stronger relationships and community connections. I learned this lesson when I was trying to develop better resources for advanced English learners. I felt frustrated because creating high-quality materials was time-consuming and expensive, and I couldn't cover all the topics my students needed. Instead of trying to solve this problem alone, I reached out to other English teachers who were facing similar challenges. We formed a collaborative group where each person contributed materials in their area of expertise, and we shared everything with the entire group. This collaboration not only solved our resource problem, but also created lasting professional relationships, ongoing learning opportunities, and a support network that has been invaluable for all of us. The obstacle of insufficient resources became the catalyst for building a professional community. Timing and patience. Not every obstacle can be turned into an immediate opportunity. Sometimes the transformation takes time, and the benefits only become clear in retrospect. Learning to trust the process and maintain patience during difficult periods is itself a valuable skill. I think about my experience moving to a new country to teach English. The first 6 months were incredibly difficult. I felt isolated, struggled with cultural differences, and questioned my decision almost daily. There were no immediate opportunities visible, just daily challenges that seemed to drain my energy and confidence. But looking back now, I can see that those difficult months were teaching me resilience, cultural sensitivity, and adaptability that have been invaluable throughout my career. The struggle wasn't just something to endure, it was actively preparing me for future challenges and opportunities. Practical steps for obstacle transformation. Here are some practical steps you can take when facing any obstacle. Initial assessment. Acknowledge the reality of the situation without judgment. What exactly is the problem? Emotional processing. Allow yourself to feel frustrated, disappointed, or worried. Don't rush to stay positive. Perspective exploration. Ask yourself, how might someone else view this situation? What would I tell a friend facing this same challenge? Opportunity scanning. Look for potential benefits, lessons, or new possibilities within the obstacle. Resource inventory. What skills, relationships, and resources do you have that could help? Small experiment design. What small, low-risk action could you take to gather more information or build momentum? Support seeking. Who could provide advice, assistance, or encouragement? Learning extraction. What is this experience teaching you that could be valuable in other situations? Remember, the goal isn't to be grateful for every obstacle or to pretend that difficulties are always good. The goal is to develop the ability to find value and possibility even in challenging circumstances. For our final segment, I want to talk about hope. Not the passive kind of hope where you just wish things will get better, but active, intentional hope that becomes a source of strength and motivation. Hope is what keeps us moving forward when we can't see the end of the tunnel, and it's often what makes the difference between those who thrive despite difficulties and those who get stuck in their challenges. Understanding the anatomy of hope. Hope is much more complex and powerful than most people realize. Psychologist Rick Snyder identified 3 components of hope: goals, pathways, and agency. This framework has been incredibly helpful in my own life and in working with students who are facing difficult circumstances. Goals are the targets we're working toward. These don't have to be huge, life-changing objectives. They can be small, daily aims that give direction to our actions. The important thing is having something to move toward rather than just trying to escape from our current situation. Pathways are the routes we believe we can take to reach our goals. Hopeful people don't just have one plan, they can imagine multiple ways to achieve what they want. When one path is blocked, they can envision alternatives. Agency is the belief that you have the power to pursue these pathways and reach your goals. It's the sense that your actions matter and that you can influence outcomes in your life. When I was going through my difficult period several years ago, I initially felt hopeless because I was missing all 3 components. I couldn't see beyond my immediate problems to set meaningful goals. I couldn't imagine pathways out of my situation, and I felt like nothing I did would make a difference. Rebuilding hope meant systematically working on each component. I started by setting very small achievable goals. Things like, I will send out 3 job applications this week, or I will have 1 meaningful conversation with a friend. These tiny goals gave me direction and purpose during a time when everything felt chaotic. The difference between hope and optimism. It's important to distinguish between hope and optimism because they're often confused. Optimism is a general expectation that good things will happen. Hope is more specific and active. It's about believing that you can work towards specific outcomes and that your efforts will make a difference. You can be hopeful without being optimistic. You might recognize that your situation is genuinely difficult and that good outcomes aren't guaranteed, but still maintain hope by focusing on what you can control and the steps you can take. I think about one of my students, Fatima, who was a refugee learning English while dealing with extremely difficult circumstances. She couldn't be optimistic about her situation. The challenges she faced were real and severe. But she maintained hope by focusing on small, daily improvements in her English skills, and by believing that these improvements would eventually create opportunities for her family. Her hope wasn't based on wishful thinking, but on the concrete evidence that her English was getting better each week, and that this progress was opening small doors that hadn't been available before. Hope as a learned skill. One of the most empowering things I've learned is that hope can be developed and strengthened like any other skill. If you're someone who struggles with hopelessness or tends to expect the worst, you're not doomed to stay that way. You can literally train your brain to be more hopeful. This training happens through small, daily practices that build your hope muscles over time. Just like physical exercise, the key is consistency rather than intensity. Goal-setting practice. Each morning, identify one small thing you want to accomplish that day. Make it specific and achievable. At the end of the day, acknowledge whether you achieved it and why or why not. Pathway thinking. When you encounter a problem, challenge yourself to come up with at least 3 different potential solutions. Don't worry about whether they're perfect, just practice the mental flexibility of seeing options. Agency building. Pay attention to small ways that your actions influence outcomes. Keep a daily note of one thing you did that made a positive difference, even if it's tiny. Story revision. Practice telling your life story in a way that emphasizes your growth, resilience, and progress, rather than just focusing on problems and setbacks. Finding hope in small progressions. One of the most reliable sources of hope is progress, even when it's almost imperceptible. The challenge is learning to recognize and value small improvements, especially when you're facing big problems. I learned this lesson from watching my father during his cancer treatment. The doctors had told us that his condition was serious and that treatment would be long and difficult. It would have been easy to focus only on the enormity of the challenge and lose hope. But my father taught me to look for small signs of progress, days when he had more energy, medical tests that showed slight improvements, moments when he felt like himself again. These tiny victories didn't change the overall situation dramatically, but they provided enough hope to keep moving forward one day at a time. This approach is incredibly relevant for English learners. Language progress often feels slow and imperceptible, especially at intermediate and advanced levels. But if you train yourself to notice small improvements, understanding a joke you wouldn't have caught last month, expressing a complex idea more clearly than before, feeling more confident in a conversation, these progressions become sources of hope that fuel continued effort. The role of community in sustaining hope. Hope is much easier to maintain when you're not carrying it alone. Community, whether it's family, friends, colleagues, or even online groups, can provide perspective, encouragement, and practical support when your own hope reserves are running low. One of the most powerful experiences I've had with community support happened during my job search after being laid off. I had been looking for work for several months, and I was starting to lose confidence. I felt like maybe I wasn't as qualified as I thought, or maybe the market had changed in ways I didn't understand. A friend suggested I join a local networking group for professionals in transition. At first, I was reluctant because I didn't want to admit publicly that I was struggling. But joining that group transformed my experience completely. Suddenly, I was surrounded by smart, capable people who were facing similar challenges. I realized that my situation wasn't a reflection of my inadequacy, but rather a common experience in the modern job market. Group members shared strategies, provided encouragement, and even made introductions that led to opportunities. More importantly, being part of this community reminded me that I had value to offer others even during my own difficult time. Helping other group members with their challenges reminded me of my own skills and capabilities. Creating hope anchors. Hope anchors are specific practices, memories, or symbols that you can turn to when hope feels elusive. These anchors serve as reminders of your strength, past successes, and reasons for continuing to move forward. My primary hope anchor is a photo on my desk of my first English class in Japan. In the picture, I'm surrounded by 12 students who had been struggling with English for years before I arrived. They look nervous but determined, and I remember feeling completely overwhelmed by the responsibility of helping them. What makes this photo a hope anchor is that I know the rest of the story. Every single one of those students achieved their English goals. Some got promotions at work, others traveled abroad for the first time, and one even moved to Australia to start a new life. When I look at that photo during difficult times, I remember that transformation is possible even when the starting point seems challenging. Other hope anchors might include a playlist of songs that remind you of your strength, letters or messages from people whose lives you've touched, physical objects that represent past achievements, quotes or poems that resonate with your values, photos of people or places that inspire you, journals documenting your growth over time. The key is choosing anchors that genuinely connect you to your sense of purpose and possibility, not just generic motivational content. Hope in the face of uncertainty. One of the biggest challenges to maintaining hope is uncertainty. When we don't know how long a difficult situation will last or whether our efforts will pay off, it's natural for hope to waver. I've learned that hope doesn't require certainty about outcomes. It requires faith and the process of growth and change. Even when I can't see exactly how a situation will resolve, I can have hope in my ability to learn, adapt, and find ways forward. This perspective was crucial during the early months of the COVID-19 pandemic. Like everyone else, I faced enormous uncertainty about my work, my health, and the future. The normal sources of stability and predictability were gone, and it would have been easy to fall into despair. Instead, I focused on what I could control, maintaining my health, supporting my students who were struggling with the transition to online learning, and developing new skills that might be valuable in whatever the new normal turned out to be. I couldn't be certain about how the pandemic would evolve or how it would affect my life long term, but I could have hope in my ability to respond constructively to whatever challenges arose. This hope wasn't based on knowing the future. It was based on trusting my capacity to handle uncertainty itself. The practice of radical acceptance. Sometimes maintaining hope requires accepting things we cannot change, while focusing our energy on things we can influence. This is what I call radical acceptance, fully acknowledging reality without wasting energy fighting against unchangeable circumstances. Radical acceptance doesn't mean giving up or becoming passive. It means distinguishing between what you can and cannot control and directing your hope and energy toward areas where your actions can make a difference. I learned this lesson from one of my students, David, who was dealing with a chronic illness that affected his energy levels and cognitive function. Learning English was important for his career, but his condition made traditional study methods extremely difficult. Initially, David was frustrated and hopeless because he kept comparing his progress to what he could have achieved when he was healthy. We worked together to practice radical acceptance of his current limitations while identifying ways he could still make progress within those constraints. Instead of fighting against his condition, David learned to work with it. He discovered that short, frequent study sessions worked better than long ones. He found that listening practice was less taxing than reading. He developed strategies for managing his energy so he could be fully present during our lessons. This radical acceptance didn't limit his progress. It actually accelerated it. By working with his reality rather than against it, David was able to achieve his English goals while also developing a more sustainable relationship with his health challenges. Hope and future self-visualization. One powerful technique for maintaining hope is visualization, but not the kind where you just imagine positive outcomes. I'm talking about detailed, realistic visualization of your future self, the person you're becoming through the process of facing your current challenges. When I work with students who are struggling with motivation, I often ask them to write a letter from their future self. I ask them to imagine themselves 5 years from now, having overcome their current challenges and achieved their goals. Then they write a letter from that future self to their current self, offering encouragement and perspective. This exercise is powerful because it helps people connect with the version of themselves they're working to become. It's not about fantasizing unrealistic outcomes, but about recognizing the person you're developing into through your current efforts and struggles. One student, Anna, was feeling hopeless about her English progress. She had been studying for 3 years, but still felt anxious about speaking in professional settings. When she wrote her letter from her future self, she imagined the confident professional she was becoming, someone who could lead international meetings, mentor colleagues from other countries, and travel independently for work. This visualization didn't eliminate her current challenges, but it connected her to a sense of purpose and direction that helped her persist through difficult moments. When she felt like giving up, she could remember the person she was working to become. The ripple effect of personal hope. When you maintain hope during difficult times, it doesn't just benefit you. It creates ripple effects that influence everyone around you. Your hope becomes a source of encouragement for others who are facing their own challenges. I've seen this repeatedly in my teaching. When one student in a class maintains hope and persistence despite difficulties, it influences the entire group dynamic. Other students start to believe that progress is possible for them too. Hope is contagious in the best possible way. This happened in one of my most challenging classes, a group of professionals who had been studying English for years without feeling like they were making significant progress. Morale was low, and several students were considering quitting. Then Maria joined the class. She was starting from a lower level than the others, but she approached every lesson with genuine enthusiasm and hope. She celebrated small victories, asked lots of questions, and maintained optimism even when she made mistakes. Within a few weeks, the entire class dynamic had shifted. Other students started participating more actively, taking more risks with their language use, and supporting each other's progress. Maria's hope had reminded everyone else of their own potential. Hope as daily practice. Maintaining hope isn't something you do once and then forget about. It requires daily practice, especially during difficult periods. Just like physical fitness, hope requires regular exercise to stay strong. My daily hope practice includes several simple but powerful habits. Morning intention. Each morning, I identify one thing I'm hopeful about for the day ahead. It might be a conversation I'm looking forward to, progress I expect to make on a project, or simply the opportunity to learn something new. Evidence collection. Throughout the day, I notice small pieces of evidence that support my hope. This might be a student who understands a concept they struggled with yesterday, a kind interaction with a stranger, or progress on a personal goal. Evening reflection. Before bed, I think about one way that I grew or made a positive difference during the day. This helps me maintain hope in my own capacity for impact and improvement. Weekly review. Each Sunday, I spend a few minutes reviewing the week and noting areas where I made progress, even if it was smaller than I had hoped. These practices aren't time-consuming, but they train my brain to notice and value the things that support hope rather than only focusing on problems and setbacks. Hope in language learning. Let me connect this specifically to your English learning journey, because language learning is itself an act of hope. Every time you study, practice, or use English, you're expressing faith in your ability to grow and improve. Language learning hope can be sustained through progress tracking. Keep a record of new words learned, conversations successfully navigated, or concepts mastered. This creates concrete evidence of your development. Goal laddering. Break large goals, like speak fluently, into smaller milestones, like have a 10-minute conversation with a stranger. This makes progress more visible and achievable. Community connection. Engage with other learners who can provide encouragement and share their own struggles and successes. Purpose connection. Regularly remind yourself why English is important to you. How will it enhance your life, career, or relationships? Celebration practice. Acknowledge and celebrate small victories rather than only focusing on how far you still have to go. Mistake reframing. View errors as evidence that you're pushing yourself and learning rather than as signs of failure. Remember, every person who has ever become fluent in a second language went through periods of frustration, plateaus, and self-doubt. Your current challenges are not unique to you. They're part of the normal process of language acquisition. This perspective can help maintain hope during difficult phases of your learning journey. Finding hope in service to others. Finally, I want to talk about one of the most reliable sources of hope, focusing on how you can help others, even while you're facing your own challenges. This might seem counterintuitive. When you're struggling, why would you take on additional responsibilities? But I've found that contributing to others' well-being often restores our own sense of hope and purpose. When we focus only on our own problems, they can seem overwhelming. When we expand our focus to include how we can help others, our own challenges often feel more manageable. This doesn't mean ignoring your own needs or taking on more than you can handle. It means recognizing that even in difficult circumstances, you have something valuable to others. During my period of unemployment, I started volunteering to help other job seekers with their resumes and interview preparation. This service helped me in multiple ways. It reminded me of my own skills and expertise, it connected me with new people and opportunities, and it gave me a sense of purpose during a time when I felt unproductive. More importantly, seeing other people overcome their challenges with my help restored my faith in the possibility of positive change. Their success stories became part of my own hope narrative. For English learners, this might mean helping newer students with concepts you've already mastered, sharing your learning strategies with others who are struggling, volunteering to translate or interpret for people in your community, writing about your learning journey to inspire others, tutoring children or others who need English support. These activities not only help others, but also reinforce your own progress and remind you of how far you've come. As we reach the end of our journey together today, I want you to take a moment to acknowledge something important. You've just spent an hour investing in your inner strength. In a world that often focuses on external achievements, you've chosen to develop the internal resources that will serve you in every area of your life. Your inner strength inventory. Right now, before you move on to whatever comes next in your day, I want you to recognize the strength you already possess. You're learning English, which means you're already demonstrating courage, persistence, and hope. You're expanding your comfort zone every time you speak, listen, read, or write in a second language. Think about the challenges you've already overcome in your life, and I know you have overcome challenges, because everyone has. You've faced difficult situations before and found ways through them. You've learned new skills, adapted to changes, and recovered from setbacks. This isn't just your history, it's evidence of your capacity to rise above whatever challenges you're facing now or will face in the future. The ripple effect of your growth. Remember that your journey of building resilience, turning obstacles into opportunities, and maintaining hope doesn't just benefit you. Everyone around you is influenced by your growth. Your family sees your determination and learns that challenges can be overcome. Your friends witness your progress and believe more in their own potential. Your colleagues observe your resilience and feel inspired to persist through their own difficulties. When you choose to rise above your challenges, you give others permission to do the same. Your courage becomes contagious, your hope becomes a beacon, and your growth becomes proof of what's possible. Your English learning as a metaphor. I want to leave you with this thought. Your English learning journey is a perfect metaphor for how to approach any challenge in life. When you started learning English, you probably felt overwhelmed by how much you didn't know. The grammar seemed impossible, the vocabulary endless, and fluent conversation felt like an unreachable dream. But you didn't let that overwhelm stop you. You started with simple words and basic sentences. You made mistakes and learned from them. You celebrated small victories and persisted through frustrating plateaus. You found ways to practice that worked for your life circumstances. You connected with others who shared your goals. Look at how far you've come. The fact that you can understand this podcast, with its complex vocabulary and sophisticated concepts, is proof of your incredible capacity for growth and transformation. Apply this same approach to any obstacle you're facing. Start small and build gradually. Learn from mistakes without letting them define you. Celebrate progress even when it feels slow. Find your unique path rather than comparing yourself to others. Connect with people who support your journey. Trust in your capacity to grow and change. Before we say goodbye, I want to give you a specific challenge. Sometime in the next 48 hours, take one small action that demonstrates the principles we've discussed today. Choose something that requires a little courage. Maybe it's speaking up in a meeting, starting a conversation with someone new, or applying for an opportunity that feels slightly out of reach. Look for the opportunity hidden in a current challenge. Ask yourself, what might this situation make possible? And take one small step in that direction. Practice hope by setting one small, specific goal for the next week and identifying 3 different ways you could achieve it. Remember, transformation happens through action, not just understanding. You now have tools and perspectives that can change how you approach difficulties, but they only work if you use them. I want to end with something personal. Creating this podcast and connecting with learners like you has been one of the greatest privileges of my life. Every message I receive about someone overcoming a challenge, achieving a goal, or simply feeling more confident reminds me why this work matters. You are stronger than you know, braver than you feel, and more capable than you can imagine. The challenges you're facing right now are not roadblocks. They're the raw materials for building the life you truly want. Your English learning journey is just one part of a larger story of growth, courage, and transformation. Trust the process, be patient with yourself, and remember that every step forward, no matter how small, is worthy of celebration. Thank you for sharing this hour with me. Thank you for your courage to keep learning and growing. Thank you for being part of a community that believes in the power of human potential. Until next week, keep rising above, keep growing, and keep believing in the incredible person you're becoming. This is Emma, sending you strength, hope, and encouragement from wherever you are in the world. You've got this.